In college, I got into a relationship with a guy. He was fine until he found Jesus. He quickly went crazy, claiming demons spoke to him, trying to buy weapons from some shady friends we had, fantasizing about how he would hurt people, and becoming incredibly controlling and physically abusive, nearly killing me a few times. Needless to say, I got the fuck out. After a few threats and really crazy behaviors, he left me alone for a while, and I thought that was that. I was headed to my dorm after a meeting one night when I decided to pass it and go to the student union, which was right down the street. I got some ice cream. As I passed the dorm, I heard steps behind me. I turned around, and I thought I saw someone in a white shirt duck behind a big signboard. I kept walking, listening carefully. I heard something move and whipped around again. There, a person, his size, staring at me from behind a tree. I couldn't see very well, but it really looked like him. I was mildly freaked out by then, but I just walked a little faster. I'd heard the occasional footsteps and breathing behind me, but I didn't dare stop or let on that I knew someone, probably him, was there. I knew he owned a gun and would likely put a bullet into me given the chance. He was that psycho and upset that I dared to break up with him. I walked all the way to the Union and got some ice cream and just sat there in the store eating, unwilling to go back out into the unlit street in case it was my crazy, armed ex. I still hadn't mustered the nerve to head back when my phone buzzed. My heart just fell out of my chest when I saw the message. It was some of my friends, a sweet couple. They'd been walking way behind me when they saw something that alarmed them enough to text me. Your ex is walking around the street. They called me before I could even text them back. Where are you? Your ex is prowling around here near your dorm. He was coming back from the direction of the Union. I think he had a gun. Was he with you? What's going on? Panicked, I assured them that I had not been with him, but someone who looked like him had been following me, and I was at the Union and was too scared to go back alone. They practically yelled at me to stay there and not go anywhere, and that they were coming. A few minutes later, they came running into the Union, breathless, eyes wide, asking why he was by my dorm and what had happened. This is possibly what scared me most of all. The boyfriend, who is a black belt in karate, is never scared, looked absolutely terrified. He was coiled into some kind of fighting stance and looking around wildly, afraid that my ex would appear with his gun. They told me they were taking me back to my dorm and calling the cops. They sandwiched between me and them, and we walked back to my dorm as quickly as we dared, the boyfriend walking in front and yelling into the darkness that my ex had better not try anything. I let the two of them into my dorm, and we went to my room, where my roommates put in a frantic call to the police. As we peeked out the windows facing the street and the side of the dorm, there he was, lurking in the trees to the side of the dorm, looking up. A street light reflected something in his hand, something shiny. I saw him tug at the 22 I realized he was carrying and looked up. We locked eyes, and I saw something, this kind of rage in his eyes that froze me. At that moment I knew he was really out to kill me, and my friends and I had foiled him this time. He quickly turned and ran away through the trees. We didn't know whether he would come back and try to break in or something, so we called the police again, and lo and behold, sirens within minutes, and officers with guns drawn coming to the area. They caught him a few hours later, still with the 22 in hand. He confessed he was indeed going to try to kill me if he had the chance, but he didn't want to take pop shots at me with my friends there. Apparently, since I had broken up with him, he was giving over to Satan, and he had a duty to make sure I died and went to hell. Of course, he went to jail and later to a mental hospital, and I moved out of that dorm a week later. I just couldn't live with the thought that he could break out and come after me again. I got some cop friends to keep an eye on my roommates until they could move out too. I was never really the same after that. I was so afraid and paranoid for years and years. Now I came out and about without any fear, but I still have nightmares about him staring at me through the trees, gun in hand, and eyes full of rage. This happened about 9 years ago. I was living with a roommate at the time in a townhouse in a suburb of Denver. My boyfriend at the time had always been kind of abusive, with the occasional slap or pinning me down on the floor, but after a family member that he was close to committed suicide, he really lost it. My ex Pierce just lost it in the middle of an argument one day, about a week after the funeral, and threw me on the ground, punching my arm over and over until there was a giant bruise on one of my shoulders and a handprint shaped bruise on my other. My face also ended up being swollen, and I had a bloody lip. My roommate called the police, and he ended up being arrested, and a no contact order was put in place. He was also ordered to go to counseling and maybe drug and alcohol meetings. Fast forward a few months, I'm living with this roommate because I was completely financially dependent on him. She's taken it upon herself to pay for me and get my GED, and a lot of my time was spent on studying for the subjects. After everything, I was very agoraphobic, but even I managed to forge some online friendships and maybe even something more with a genuinely kind guy. One day, Pierce's grandma stopped by to take me to pay my phone bill. She lived close by in the same townhouse complex and was more or less right behind where I lived. I remembered it being the first beautiful and slightly warm day after a long winter, so I opened all the blinds and let the sunlight in, and I left them open when I left. After paying my phone bill, Pierce started calling her. I wasn't too concerned because I knew that he was supposed to be at his court mandated counseling shortly. I couldn't hear what he was saying, but his grandmother told him that we had just stopped at McDonald's again. Not an issue at this point. I continued to eat my Big Mac or whatever until maybe 3 minutes later. Pierce calls again. His grandma tells him that she's probably going to be home in about 10 minutes. The call ends. I finish my food, and we leave. Again in the car, as I'm maybe 2 minutes away from where I live, Pierce calls again. I still can't hear his side of the conversation, but his grandma tells him the intersection we just passed, and suddenly I have this terrible sinking feeling in my stomach. I know something is wrong, and I can't identify what, but I know in my heart of hearts that something is very wrong. I consider asking his grandma for help, but for context, his grandmother watched Pierce hit me and try to strangle me and openly express disgust at how I can't help but piss him off. The same lady that knew her daughter broke Pierce's nose when he was 6 because he saw his mother flip someone off and copied her and did nothing to intervene or let her know that that wasn't okay. The family member that Pierce was mourning for often told him he was fucked up and was probably the most verbally and emotionally abusive person I have ever witnessed in real life or any movie, book, or whatever. So this family is just super fucked and abusive to other people, to each other, so I'm completely alone in this situation. Anyway, his grandma pulls in front of where I live, and I notice all of the blinds I had opened are now closed. We go inside, and once she leaves, I walk upstairs to my room and see a random Word document open on my computer. Pierce had written a whole page worth of shit, but I only pay attention to the big words at the top. I read your emails immediately. I know that he's seen the emails between me and a guy I'd met. Even though they weren't outright sexual or flirty, you could kind of tell there was something there. My brain stopped reading at this point, and I need to find out if he's still in my building. Because there's a no contact order, I know he would have come in through the back door so nobody would see him. So my mind latches onto this idea that if the back door is locked, he's probably gone. I run downstairs to the door, and I see that it's locked. But as soon as I reach the door, I hear a closet sliding open from the room I was just in, loud and angry footsteps, and he's yelling my name. I know that this may sound weird, but I can't recall exact details. I remember his face in mine. Before I could understand what was happening, I remember being back up in that room again. I think to go through all of my emails with him. I remember him slapping me hard in the face over and over until I got dizzy. I remember somehow convincing him to let me use my phone to respond to one of my roommate's texts. I don't remember what I said, but I remember that she called right away. I remember Pierce standing up 2 feet away from me and looking at me, believing he was going to kill me, and my roommate asking me, "Are you safe?" I only said no. She told me that she was on her way and would be there as fast as she could. Eventually, Pierce became convinced that I had called the police. With a knife in his hands, told me that if they were coming anyway, that he might as well give me what I deserve. I managed to convince him that I didn't call the police, and then he started crying about what a terrible person he was and threatened to kill himself with that knife. So, with a handprint on my swollen face, I tried to convince him that he wasn't terrible and to please not kill himself until my roommate came home. Insane ex boyfriend, I moved states, had my name changed, and only feel safe in buildings in big cities where I'm at least 3 stories up. Let's not meet again. When I was a little kid, me and my mom would visit my grandparents, and we would all go to church together when we would visit from out of town. We had a friend at the church who I would be super excited to visit every time I went. We would talk a lot about Pokemon and just stuff we liked in general. Around that time, I started puberty, and he seemed to be attracted to me. He would hug me and ruffle my hair. It seemed innocent for a while, and we sort of had a relationship for a few months. Every time was a good up until we were dating. I was probably around 16, and he was several years older than me. He one day confided in me that he could see angels, and he was giving a sword from Jesus to fight demons. Yes, he really said that. He said that he could see angels and that Jesus Christ himself gave him a sword to fight demons. And as stupid as I was, I believed him. I don't know why I did, but I did. The times where I wasn't visiting, we would talk over Steam, where we played TF2 most of the time. He would tell me these stories of fighting demons and would talk to me through his angel. And it got so much weirder. He would tell me how I would be his princess in heaven and that we would rule together. That's around the time I started getting uncomfortable and weirded out whenever he would hug me or try to go further with me. At one point, over an incident, I tried to cut ties with him and broke up. He would not have it one bit. He would continuously send me emails begging for me to come back and how I was making a bad choice leaving him. The last time I ever came into contact with him was also the last time I went to that church. Me and my mom and my little brother all had to go to the church for a small get-together for my grandma's birthday party. Knowing the ex's family caters church events, I knew in my guts he was going to probably be there. My mom told me not to worry about it when I knew that something was going to happen. When we arrived, I told my mom that I was going into a room where the little kids were playing at where I knew I would be safe while we waited for cake. I luckily brought my DS to distract myself and sat down to play. All of a sudden, I felt like someone was looming over me, a big presence. I knew it was him. I instantly went into flight mode and ran and hid around the church until he stopped following me and looking for me. My mom and my brother instantly took me back to the house after I came out of hiding, and I never went back to that church again.